send me slides, but maybe you want to access them to me or something like that, that's fine too. Now, when you're the audience, you're going to want to be taking notes, because on the final I'll be asking you questions about what, I figured you'd have a paper or ask you a few questions on the final. So you want to be taking kind of general notes, and think about who's your favorite, who's not person, but subject, and maybe a top 3 kind of thing as far as that's concerned. I'll also ask you to give your speakers the same consideration that I asked for, and to be off of your electronic devices, and all the usual things like not talking to each other and stuff like that sometimes somehow we have to deal with. And then after that, I will have to be strict with the 10 minutes, because we won't have enough time. We have 21 people in the class, and it looks like most of you are here, so we won't have enough time. I do have a study guide for you that we can go over together, and I can talk about that so it's nice and clear, no surprises on the final. I think I already mentioned too, if there are any questions, I have a policy in all my exams, assessments, that if there's any questions where more than 50% missed them, then everybody gets it free, so there won't be any surprises or anything like that. Okay, just want to see what you learned. That's what assessments are all about. So I can do this randomly by going through the roster, or people can volunteer.
I'll go.
Jake. If there's anything I can help with here. No clicker. I wish there was a clicker. You have to walk back and forth. It's a poorly designed class.
You have a designated clicker.
So you just have to.
Click master.
No, I mean,
I know.
Master clicker.
oh, there you go. Yeah. So you just have to. It's heaven forbid the keyboard's
Like
connected to the computer with wire.
The projector.
Oh.
Cool cube.
Trying to explain slime molds on the side of a apartment. It's drawing a blob.
That's right. Jake, thanks.
Okay. Hydrogen boron fusion. That's
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jake, and I read and talked about hydrogen boron fusion, which, right, get off right off the bat. Difference between fusion and fission. To understand what specifically hydrogen boron, why it's special, we gotta know that fission is taking fission is taking apart a heavy atom to create smaller, lighter atoms, light atoms, and heat. And you get that's uranium and plutonium, like a bomb, right? That you take a very, very large, heavy atom like that has 60, 100. Protons, and you smash it in this tiny little piece that sends radiation everywhere, but a lot of energy. Fusion is when you smush two or more lighter atoms together to create newer, other light atoms. And that also creates a lot more energy. And principally it's hydrogen and helium, but also hydrogen bonds, right? So that's the difference between uranium bonds and hydrogen bonds. But, right? But beyond that, biggest fusion generator there is, suns, our sun. It's currently, we're using it as a fusion generator for everything, not just photovoltaics, and pretty much every single renewable energy needs the sun for something. Wind, you're heating up convection currents, hydro, all sorts of stuff, moving precipitation around, so you need the sun for that. Tidal systems, That's the moon, but and biomass, you need the sun to make biomass. Fossil fuel is also dependent on the fission from the sun millions of years ago. It all dies, mounds up. I'm not doing a report about that, but you know that fission is basically how we're doing everything. But the problem is, it turns off at night, or it's unpredictable from its wind. It's out of our control. It's this thing that's out there that we can't handle. So the solution is man-made fusion, and it already technically exists. There are generators in laboratories that can fuse things together and make energy. There's two. The traditional way is deuterium and tritium, both hydrogen atoms. Just view it like a math problem here. Two rare hydrogen isotopes, one with 1 proton, 1 neutron, and the other one with 1 proton and 2 neutrons. You smush them together via lots and lots of big processes, mostly heat, and you get 2 protons and 1 neutron. But this little bugger down here is 1 extra neutron, and that creates all sorts of problems because it's not attached to anything. And so it's because of that, it's always been sort of at the peripheral preferability of projects, because you're going to have to deal with that little neutron constantly. Come in hydrogen boron, which is actually protium, which is the most common hydrogen element, entire universe. 1 proton, no neutrons, and extremely common boron. We're talking, we have 100,000 year supply just with the mines we have right now, right? 5 protons, 6 neutrons, smush them together, you get 3 heliums, boop, 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 all with 2 protons, 2 neutrons, nice and clean. Nice and simple, right? Seems like the way to do it. The practicals, deuterium and tritium, extremely rare isotopes. They barely exist in nature. It's radioactive. You're constantly having to deal with that free neutron. And because of that, the parts wear out. They're radioactive afterwards. All sorts of problems. 6 months lifespan for one of those machines. And it requires 180 million degrees Fahrenheit to get one of that reaction. Protium boron, extremely common isotopes. They're everywhere. You can make hydrogen protium with water. And the only byproduct is helium, which is actually a useful thing because helium's a relatively rare element anyway. And I bet you if we had those machines, we'd market it and harvest it and sell it anyway. But machine part's extremely durable. The only potential byproduct is a minor thing of helium atoms mushing with the boron, but that won't shut down the machine. The machine just sort of can turn off, and it's just done, and they clean it, and it's fine. The big downside, 5.4 billion degrees Fahrenheit. That is hotter than the sun at 2.25 million degrees Fahrenheit. That is the reason why we even considered something like this. And, right, the key to making hydrogen boron work is basically comes down to one firm, the TCF, it's an acronym, using plasma as a means to heat the boron and hydrogen suspended in via magnetic fields, right? But the plasma stability is a problem because the hotter you get, the less stable it is. And as plasma cannot literally touch anything, at all, anything, and it will instantly collapse or cause problems or, collapse you need it as a suspended in a field. In outer space, it's perfectly fine because there's nothing there anyway, right? The sun. So you have, the problem is you have to maintain these magnetic fields constantly, otherwise it collapses. The sun has a beautiful magnetic field, holds all the plasma and it's fine. How it works is that if you spin plasma with hydrogen lasers, unrelated, just happen to be hydrogen at very high speeds, it creates its own magnetic fields. And if you get it hot enough, you have to get this hot enough. If you spin the plasma fast enough, it will get hotter the faster you spin, and eventually it will become hot enough to fuse the boron and hydrogen. But you have to maintain that heat basically indefinitely for as long as you want this machine to run. So those are the two big problems: long enough and hot enough. That's what?
2 minutes.
Okay. And now we just have to build it, right? Indefinitely suspended plasma exists. Lasers, these machines, they've functionally made these plasma suspended machines. Man-made heat in the billions exists. Large Hadron Collider can reach trillions of degrees. And the size to create this machine, if you wanted to make one that just made plasma hot enough for fusion, it's calculable. And it's a matter of engineering. The small scale is looking promising. They're building them. They're not marketable yet because power plants remain theoretical. You'd have to build a pretty big dang one of these to be a practical source of money. And getting the price per kilowatt down will attract more investors. They say that the goal is 5 to 10 cents. They have not done that yet. So if they're able to do that, that's a seriously compatible price. It's not quite good as coal, but market's big. The other thing is that you have to spend money or energy on the lasers, getting them in. So there's energy in and energy out balance. But these are all engineering problems that can be fixed eventually, hopefully. And and it's carbon free. I never mentioned that, but it's carbon free because it only makes helium, and helium's fine. So that's why this hydrogen boron fusion will be a good thing for global warming. It's new source energy. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Jake. Excellent job. Next.
Hi, my name's Travis, and I chose to do smart highways. So smart highways are a combination of things. They're intelligent transport systems, photovoltaic pavement, wireless vehicle charging, and digital road markings. First is the intelligent transportation system. Okay, so to get a smart highway system, you would need to use a combination of renewable energy sources, otherwise it's not that smart. But some of the pros of it is you could do electronic toll collection to pay for the infrastructure it would take to build a smart highway. You'd be able to kind of update the current system of road markings, glowing lane dividers and road markings. You'd have up-to-the-minute traffic signal coordination, traveler information systems, law enforcement, national security upgrades, where you could, well, this is kind of a pro and a con in my opinion. On one hand, you'd be able to find anybody on the road at any given time. On the other hand, you'd be able to find anybody on the road at any given time. It's kind of, with technology, it's kind of the way it goes these days. Highway alteration, condition alterations, and autonomous vehicle navigation. The autonomous vehicle navigation is kind of like it wouldn't be what things like Uber and Tesla are trying to do. If you ever read about Amazon and how their robots can move freely throughout their massive facility, it's a set of magnetic structures within the building that kind of guide the vehicle. So it's not set up with cameras and infrareds. It would be literally within the road itself. Solar pavement, smart road panels. There's kind of two different products on the market right now. One on the left there it's an adhesive panel that comes in 12 by 12 sheets. It's a much cheaper option, but it doesn't last as long, and it doesn't have the LED lights included as the ones on the right. The ones on the right would take a complete infrastructure overhaul. They're little hexagon panels that have many benefits, and I'll get to those in a minute because it's part of the road markings and other benefits. This is something I found on price comparison, renewability, lifespan of this is for the hexagon panels, not the adhesive panels, because those don't last as long and would require constant upkeep. But as you can see that the cost it is greater than asphalt, but in the long run, I think it would actually pay for itself. This is kind of how the wireless vehicle charging works. Let's see if I get this right. It's magnetic induction charging. It's kind of like how the new cell phone charging docks work, where you don't need a wire. You just set your phone on the charging pad and it charges the vehicle. These power lines would be laid across beneath the solar voltaic panels or grass in some cases, and they'd be set out every so often, so as your car drives over it, it wouldn't need to be charged. It would literally be charged as it was driven. These are a couple artist renderings of what that could look like. Like I said, the grass or the green area is where the magnetic induction system would be, the blue being kind of the smart road panels and whatnot. The road markings is something I found really cool. Like on the most basic side of the scale, you could just have glowing road markers that would, if you were looking in the rear view, all of that would be red. I've seen some renderings that show that, but it would allow you to see if accidents were coming up, what the road conditions are, if there's animals on the road, amongst other benefits. And those hexagon road panels, each one of them had 175 LEDs in them of different colors, so they can, be written statements and or just like the snowflake symbols, letting you know that the road is slippery. The benefit from that is some of the heat could actually prevent ice buildup on the road. There would be no black ice. It's just a benefit of melting snow. So I'm gonna wrap up. I know that was pretty quick. The session wasn't very long. Most of my information actually came off of finding other information. But the future of roadways is pretty cool. There's been a bunch of different ideas people have come forth, and, like the one on the top there I thought was really interesting, putting wind turbines in any major valley, where there's a bridge. Even if something like this was used just to charge lighting, roadway lighting and or sidewalk signals or something like that, it doesn't have to be on every post, but it's just incorporating renewable energy into the road, which is constantly exposed. I saw a different idea that I didn't put up here that was actually using the wind from the cars driving by. They would line the highways with walls, and in the walls were little turbines, and as you drove by, the wind would go through the turbine and actually create electricity. So that's my presentation.
Any volunteers? Do I pick Jay? Thank you, John.
When I picked this, I had no idea what it was. Everybody was raising their hands, choosing their topics, and I like the picture of the kelp on the cover. So, but marine permaculture, it actually turns out to be very cool. It was it's actually the result of one very smart guy who went to Princeton and Caltech and studied like engineering, physics, and stuff. And he spent 4 years at Woods Hole in Massachusetts, gaining an understanding of what carbon is doing to the ocean. And he was realizing that the heat and the carbon is causing the death of plankton and kelp. And so he wanted to take that on as a challenge to kind of solve it. His perspective wasn't so much global warming as it was food source, because a lot of countries rely on seafood for food source, and they were their kelp is dying. Okay, well, some of this we've known, right? 90% of the atmospheric warming is going into the ocean, and as a result, the plant life is dying and the coral is bleaching. And in particularly the kelp off Western Australia and the Western U.S. is being decimated. There was something called a warm blob in 2014 that lasted a year that really devastated a lot of the California kelp. And that has since abated, and I'm not sure if that was global warming induced or not. I suspect it might be. And not all kelp, but most kelp needs a cooler water to survive. There's other kelp in the tropics that do well, but then it's gotten so hot that now the temperature range for tropical kelp is also exceeded, so they're dying as well. The photic zone is the top layer of the ocean that the light can penetrate. So this can be as much as 500 feet if the sun's directly on it and it's clear water, and it's kind of variable. But that is where the heat pretty much builds up and it pretty much stays there. So the overturning circulation happens when I guess they call them the conveyor belt of currents. In California, it comes from the north. It's cold water that flows south, and that pulls up the nutrients and the cool water up to the surface. But when the layer above it is too warm, it disturbs that and prevents the cool water from rising. The interesting thing that he said about the carbon in this photic zone is that it's all at the top, but the deep ocean, which also contains carbon, doesn't contain as much as a percent. And his illustration was if all the atmospheric carbon dioxide was into the ocean, spread evenly across the whole ocean, it would only amount to about 2% increase. So the problem then becomes one of distribution. How do you take the carbon that's building up in the upper layers of the ocean and get it to the lower layers, or conversely, how do you continue that overturning circulation? And he came up with a really clever idea. He calls it the marine permaculture array, and he is von Herzl. And I think his motivation was as a food source because he wanted to make something that could make money. And so I'll explain later that he's actually has some demonstration projects that are soon to be run. But basically, there's this big long tube that floats on the surface, and it goes down below what they call the thermocline, below into the coldest part of the ocean. And there's a flapper valve on the top, on the bottom, and it uses wave action to actually pump the water through the tube up onto the surface. And that will connect to what he calls like a trough at the top, and the trough will provide a baseline for kelp seed. So the colder water with the nutrients comes up, it goes through the trough, and helps support the plankton as well as the kelp. Once you've established, actually I'll show you he did this with just cold water, forgetting the kelp. Kelp didn't come to mind. All this plankton came up, and suddenly within 57 hours, 3 days, he had fish coming to eat the plankton. And they were shocked that it didn't, yeah, that happened so quickly. Fish showed up, the shark showed up, and then 2 weeks later the shark was still there and all the plankton was gone and the fish were gone. And that's what gave him the idea to establish kelp, because the fish need a place to hide. So it worked really well, except that, you know, the shark munched out everything, plankton as well as all the fish.
That's an unusual shark in that it eats plankton.
It is.
The whale shark's not like most sharks.
No, whale shark?
Yeah, you said that's a whale shark is a plankton eater. It's the largest fish. All other sharks are big predators with big
Right.
teeth. Yeah.
I didn't realize it. Well, and there goes his plankton. So he started with food security, and he's showing a lot of success. One is in Zanzibar, where growing and harvesting seaweed is how they feed themselves. It's off Tanzania, in the Indian Ocean. So they've asked him to install his permaculture arrays, and they're showing some success already, and I think it's success, and that was just beginning earlier this year and late last year. And what happens is once you've established a cooler environment where the plankton and the kelp can survive, then everything else seems to come in. You know, all the other fish, all the foraging fish, the plankton now provides a place for hiding. And then, I don't think I have the picture, but they show rows of kelp that they've planted. It's like corn underwater. I mean, it's pretty impressive. He's also, in Australia, they talked about planting the red seaweed, which they can use as feed for cows, because that produces a lot less methane within the cow as what we feel now, and things like that. And then in American Samoa, he did a test run on coral, because there was an area off American Samoa where the coral was dying, like it is everywhere. He installed his marine permaculture arrays, and within, I think I said 24 hours, color was beginning to come back into the coral. And that also shocked everybody. And if you've done that, then you can go back to protecting coastlines, because now you can grow kelp, you can reintroduce the coral. It seems almost too good to be true, and I couldn't find a lot wrong with it. The stuff they use to build this thing is like, it's stuff they already have. It's tubes, it's a flapper valve. It's hard plastic for seeding the kelp. I wanted to emphasize it's not really a solution to climate change, because it does nothing to reduce carbon. I mean, it'll help sequester the carbon, because the carbon now can go into the ocean and be dispersed, but until we stop burning carbon. But like I say, it does enhance the long-term carbon sequestration. And it can stop and even reverse some of what we've already done with the oceans. So, my last comment about money is, I think when there's money involved, things happen fast. I'm a fan of carbon fee, dividend, and when you put money into the game, you make it expensive to do bad things, and you make it a money winner to do good things. It has a really good shot at succeeding.
Thank you.
All good?
Sure. You guys are doing great with the timeline. Thank you.
Can't be too expensive to plant the kelp. Can't be too expensive to plant the kelp. Yeah.
It's getting colder.